Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the WCNC Plus Live Impact News Studio. I am WCNC Charlotte Sports Director Nick Carboni, and we are on the eve of the 2025 NFL season, specifically the Carolina Panthers season, which begins Sunday in Jacksonville. We are going to be here every Monday night at 9 o'clock on WCNC Plus to talk Panthers. That'll be after games and looking ahead to the next game. Today, it is looking forward to the entire 2025 season. And every Monday, we will bring you a special guest who covers the Panthers and covers the NFL. Couldn't kick it off any better way than with our guest today. That is Vashti from CarolinaBlitz.com. You can find exclusive interviews, photos, videos. The rookie series you did in training camp is phenomenal. Vashti, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Of course. So, all right, let's just get started. General thoughts on what you saw in the Panthers preseason as a team, and more specifically, the changed approach to the preseason from head coach Dave Canales.
Yeah, I thought that David learned from not playing his starters hardly any to playing them a little bit more. I honestly felt like they could have gotten a bit more reps. If you were watching the preseason expecting to get comfort and encouragement heading into the regular season, you might not have gotten that. You know, in that game against the Houston Texans, you had hope against the Browns. The Texans, you kind of went off of a cliff, and then you had to recalibrate, rebalance yourself. I think the offense will obviously be improved. There are going to be questions, though, across the board. But, you know, the preseason is exactly that. They're not going to show us everything that they want that we would see during the regular season, just really glimpses. And Canales said it was more about routine than it was about actual game planning. So there's still question marks. And
the biggest question mark, of course, is can Bryce finish or start 2025 like he finished 2024? So here on Monday, and you were in the press conference room when Dave Canales was kind of asked about Bryce last year and how he's looking towards this year, and Dave Canales basically shifted it to only looking at Bryce heading into the 2025 season, but he was effusive in his praise of the quarterback. Take a listen.
I'm not looking for last year. I can just tell you where we're at right now. We got a great leader who's stepping into the huddle, making sure the tempo's right, making sure the attitude's right, the energy's right. You're talking about a guy who's won at the highest level in college football. He knows how to be a champion. He knows how to win. And I just love the way that he's affecting all of us, the way that he's affecting his teammates. But it's about his daily approach, you know, and the consistency that comes with that, you know. And I'm just really fired up about, you know, being able to go out there and battle again on Sunday with him.
All right, Vashti, what did you make of Canales' comments here on Monday about Bryce Young? And what have you made of their relationship really in the last 365 days or less, from the benching to the comeback and now heading into his second year with him?
I think that they are still going through the repairing process. Canales doesn't want to talk about last year. Mm-hmm. Bryce doesn't want to talk about last year. There are not many guys on that team who really want to talk about last year. And I understand why, because it was really up and down for both guys. And, you know, but what we have seen is a different Bryce Young. We saw him improve on the field at the end of last season. I think that's what's given people hope. But who he is as a person, he's talking trash to J.C. Horn during practice. You know, he has personalized handshakes with all of his receivers. This is a young man who is coming into himself and learning who he is, not just on the field, but off of the field. And when you merge those two together, he could improve during this very critical third season that he will be the guy for the Panthers going forward.
We've heard Canales talk about it, even dating back to around that Atlanta game to close last season, that kind of the trust in Bryce has allowed him to open up the playbook. As far as you could tell in camp, and it's tough, right? Like, we don't see what's on the call sheet. We don't know what the checks mean. Is there more trust in Bryce from Canales and the coaching staff when it comes to going up to the line of scrimmage, checking into something else, going up with a couple plays? Like, have you been able to deduce that they are giving him more responsibility?
I think so. And it stems off of his improved play. I see Bryce rolling out more, and he's been historically more dangerous when he's kind of moving out of the pocket and catching defenses off guard. And I understand that a lot of coordinators want their guys to kind of rest in the pocket, go through their checks, but Bryce can be extremely dangerous when he moves around. And then he also has shown that he is a threat on the ground. He'll burst out and get you chunk yardage on the ground as well. So all of that plays into the comfortability, the confidence that Bryce has in himself, and that this coaching staff is starting to have in him.
What can you take from Bryce's preseason, not just in the games, but in practice? And again, understanding that, especially for a quarterback like Bryce, and so much of what he does is off script, how hard it is to tell what's going on with him during practice in August and July. But as a quarterback, did you see improvement this summer coming off of last year?
I think so. And I think it started just with him getting together with the receivers during the offseason, taking a leadership role in planning these trips and getting guys together. And we've seen flashes during practice with some explosive plays. Canales said he hit Legette today in practice for a 40-yard bomb and got things going. And so I think it's showing more in his leadership than anything else. Time will tell whether that will translate on the field. But I think it will help fasten that process, especially with a wide receiver room that is so young.
You know, it's funny, and I'm sure you get this all the time. I have people that, are outside the industry, don't cover football every day, certainly don't cover the Panthers every day, assuming like Bryce is the guy, he's going to be here for 10 years. But to me, it seems like this front office and coaching staff is still in wait-and-see mode with him, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Brent Tillis basically said, when asked about long-term extension, we're going to wait and see how Bryce performs. The same thing with left tackle Ikem Ekwonu. These guys have shown flashes. Now they have to prove that they deserve that franchise generational type money, and that happens during the season. And you see improvement, and you see an upward trajectory. What you don't want is for that to level off. And so I absolutely understand them not. They're bought in mindset, but when you buy in mindset and pocketbook, then you're really bought in. And I think they're waiting on that, and Bryce will have to prove that on the field.
Did Bryce's season last year kind of callous him to be able to withstand if he does have a bad day Sunday, to where it doesn't just snowball on him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being a guy like Bryce in every stage of your maturation process. You are the guy, and you have found success in high school at a national powerhouse like Mater Dei. Then you go to Alabama, you win a Heisman Trophy at Alabama, and then you go to the Panthers, and for the first time in your life, you're benched. That's tough. And so there is a hardness that comes to having to go through those bumps along the journey. And so, if Bryce has a bad play or a bad game, he said, man, look what I went through last year. I can bounce back and still be that guy for this team.
Now, while it might be hard for you and I to really dissect what he's doing on the field in an August practice, you're sitting there front row at that podium every time he comes up to it. Have you noticed a difference in his demeanor this summer?
Absolutely. I mean, you'll see it. You see it, Nick. I mean, he'll come in, he'll ask us a question.
Yeah.
He's more jovial with us, more comfortable with us as media, and we can be kind of daunting. These guys aren't used to us being in their space in college. So when you get into the pros, we're in the locker room.
Yeah.
We're there in your space. You see us on a regular basis, and he's more comfortable with us, and in turn we can be more comfortable with him and allow him to show little nuances of his personality. And I think that's where you go from kind of being a young guy who is still questioning himself to a man who takes ownership of the team. And we've seen that in Bryce, and like I said, now he has to prove it on the field. But he definitely, it's like watching a kid grow up in front of your eyes, just to see how he's matured in these last couple of years.
Now we'll finish off the Bryce stuff with this $1 million question, perhaps tens of millions of dollars involved in this question. What kind of season would it take for Bryce to get that fifth-year extension? And then what kind of season would it take for Bryce to get extended beyond that after 2025?
Well, the Panthers have to win, right? And, he has to throw more touchdowns and interceptions. He has to show that he can be a leader and a franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future. But it first starts with winning. And they can't win in spite of you. They have to win because of you. And that's where I think the rubber meets the road between guys who are just role players on teams and guys who are playmakers on teams and difference makers, and Bryce has to be a difference maker.
All right, here with Vashti Hurt from CarolinaBlitz.com to discuss the upcoming Panthers season. We're going to be right back, and we are going to talk about that roller coaster ride in the receiver room last week and how things are shaking out for Sunday at Jacksonville. Stick around. Nick Carboni here once again with Vashti Hurt from CarolinaBlitz.com at Keep Blitz, and we are talking about the upcoming Carolina Panthers season. Talked a lot about Bryce Young, but Vashti, last week was about as hectic as it gets 2 weeks before the season. Generally, cuts are made, 53-man is set for the most part, and you know what you're riding into the season with. But, man, I mean, starting on Tuesday, Hunter Renfrow gets released. On Wednesday, Adam Thielen is traded. Thursday, Jalen Coker gets injured. Saturday, Renfrow's back, and Coker is on IR out at least 4 weeks. What did you make of all that so close to the season? Just big picture, when you have a quarterback that we talk about in Bryce Young who needs to have a good start and a receiver room that's kind of, roles are changing, personnel is changing at the last minute.
It's tough, because you go through training camp with these guys, you go through the preseason with these guys, and then you have an idea of who is going to be on the 53, and that's who you plan to roll with. I think that in the back house channels, they knew that Adam Thielen trade was going to happen. There were rumblings. I think even Renfrow kind of alluded to it when we talked to him today, that they were preparing to be without Adam Thielen. So I'm sure they talked to Bryce, and everybody knew that was a strong possibility. But still, you develop rapport and relationships with these guys during the offseason. And then to have Jalen Coker go out. I saw the Renfrow signing, and then when I saw the corresponding move, I'm like, what? Wait.
Of course, they put that out as a secondary move, but it was the headline.
That was the headline. Yeah. The fact that Coker was going to IR for 4 weeks, that was a bigger headline than Renfrow re-signing, and that's a huge blow, because Coker was a guy who a lot of people were expecting a lot of from this season, and that could still be the case, but to start on IR for the first 4 weeks, that's a tough blow to a position group that had a lot of high hopes heading into week one.
I'll get your thoughts on the Thielen trade and how it looks now in a moment, but Renfrow coming back, his camp, it was like Hunter Renfrow week up there on Mint Street. Dabo Swinney in the house. He had a great couple of weeks before that hamstring injury slowed him down. How much do you think he can realistically contribute right away, considering this is a guy that got cut last week, and they were probably trying to get him to be on the practice squad before the Coker injury?
It seemed as if, and he said as much today when we talked to him, that they were trying to find a role for him on the practice squad. I don't think Renfrow wanted to be on the practice squad. That was what I sensed. If he wanted to be on a team, he wanted to be on that 53-man roster, and obviously, ultimately, that happened. But, that is one of my concerns, and I have to keep it real with you, Nick. For a guy who's been out of football and for a whole season, then was sidelined a bit with injury, now to be thrust in a starting role on the team, that's a lot. And, can his body take it? Is he going to be able to withstand that? Who knows? I do think we might see some of Jimmy Horn, the 6th-round draft pick out of Colorado. Bryson Tremaine had an impressive training camp. So although he will likely be the starter, I think that in order to compensate for that loss of Jalen Coker, they're going to have to use some of these younger guys a bit more, especially for an older player. He's not even that old, but
in that room he is. He and David group, Moore,
right? Yeah. For an older guy who's been out of the game, they're going to have to make sure that he's going to be able to withstand the rigorous play on the field.
Yeah, so different transactions, but when you break it down, they lose Jalen Coker and Adam Thielen in 1 week. Here's what General Manager Dan Morgan said about Dylan Thielen, and again, this was before Jalen Coker was injured. Check it out.
And I could tell that he was really excited about the possibility that might happen. I told him, I'd do my best to make it happen, but I'm not just going to give you away. We're going to have to get something, fourth-round value or something that we feel for the Carolina Panthers is good, because you're a really good receiver, you're a really good leader. So we wanted to make sure that we got the compensation that we felt comfortable with before we did it. So I'm glad it worked out.
It was an interesting week, Vashti. It was clear that Adam Thielen and his family wanted to go back to Minnesota. What did you make of the way Dan Morgan handled all this? Because there's the team element and what's best for the franchise, and then there's the trying to do right by a veteran player.
Dan Morgan was not going to be bullied in this situation. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we've seen in the past where the Panthers might have been, they were on the short end of the stick when it came to player trades. He knew he wanted the compensation was a fourth round and nothing less. And if they were going to make that trade happen and they wanted to bring Adam Thielen back, Adam Thielen wanted to go back home. Obviously, the Vikings wanted to bring him back. It was up to the Vikings to figure out how they could provide the compensation that Dan Morgan required. I think it's great that he held a hard line. You're going to have to do that. The Panthers had all the cards. So if you want this guy, this is what we want. We will play with him if we need to. He was a guy who was a leading receiver for us just a few years ago. So he held all the cards, and he played them the way that they needed to be played to benefit the Carolina Panthers.
He certainly held all the cards. He didn't have a crystal ball. He didn't know Jalen Coker was going to get injured 24 hours later. This was a move with an eye on the future draft picks, future of these young receivers. So maybe we'll get a chance to ask Dan this. Do you think he'd would still have done it if he knew Jalen was going to get injured? Because he wasn't just thinking about week one.
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's no crystal ball. And I know when Dan heard the injury to Jalen, he was like, bruh, this could not be worse timing. Like the Icky injury. It's just bad timing heading into the first week of the season. But the deal is done. Now we hear all the time, this is a catchphrase we hear, it's next man up. And so Jalen Coker is out. You have this strong wide receiver room. Somebody is going to have to step up, whether it's Renfro, whether it's Tremaine, whether it's Jimmy Horn Jr., those guys, and then also, Xavier and T-Mac. As a collective, that room is going to have to step up and make it work.
Let's talk about those two guys as we wrap up this segment. Tetairoa McMillan, he had an interesting camp. They were very clearly throwing a lot at him physically, probably a little mentally. Didn't give him a lot of calls when the refs were out there. What did you think of his camp and his readiness for week one of his first season?
He showed flashes, I think. I would have liked to see him a bit targeted more during the preseason. I'm an advocate for getting rookies as much time on the field as they can. So we didn't really see a ton from him, but he's a guy who can win those jump ball situations. He's a guy that you can throw it up in tight windows, and he's supposed to make those one-handed or those tough catches. He's supposed to moss the DBs and be able to go over top of them and make those plays. I think he can do it. We'll have to see, though.
He does seem like one of those guys, and we've seen examples of this where he's going to have a misread on what Bryce is doing one play, but then fix it the next. And I think that chemistry we could see develop in one game, not be complete, but get better in one game. You could see it in real time. Do you think this is going to be a little bit of a feeling out thing between him and Bryce as the season starts, or are they kind of done with that?
I don't think you can feel, feeling things out is for the preseason.
Yeah.
Week one, they have to get going, and it might be a rough couple of series, but you got to snap into that pretty quickly and be prepared. You've had all off season to prepare for this 1 week, and so it might be rough at first. And T-Mac seemed like, you were there. He seemed very chill, very. As a matter of fact,
maybe I'll get nervous later.
Yeah, kind of matter of fact.
Not nervous on Monday.
About being a rookie starting in your first NFL career game. Honestly, at first I was like, man, this is weird. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You have a team of guys who don't get too high, don't get too low, and that there's a level of focus and level-headedness that will take them far in instances where he and Bryce might not make a connection. As you mentioned, he's a guy who will automatically mentally corrected, and you can almost see him going through the correction process. And we'll see that during the game. If they miss, that'll be a situation where Canales might see it and they see it and they go right back to that play and he makes that play. So that's what you hope will happen between those two.
Yeah, a lot of hopes for Xavier Legette. 8 drops last year, but showed some really promising things. Took himself out of the game against the Browns with that fight. Do you think he's going to be able to improve some of those drops from last year?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no way. And I think people have to stop being out on rookies. And I understand that. And I think Panthers fans specifically, I remember the trash about Derek Brown, Bryce Young, Xavier Legette. Relax. Allow these players to really come into themselves as NFL players. Xavier was not supposed to be the man last year. It was supposed to be Deontay Johnson. But that, so he was thrust into that X role, and he was not ready for that. And so you have some guys who automatically pick up on it. He had a couple of drops, but I think what we saw from him was that he was able to get open. And the drops you can correct. The separation might be hard for some guys. Xavier can get separation. He has speed. He has size. I think he has a breakout season this year. He's going to make up for those drops that he had last year.
All right, interesting stuff. One more segment to go with Vashti Hurt here on WCNC Plus. We're talking about the Jaguars. So what did the Panthers have to say about two-way Heisman winner Travis Hunter? Not much. Hear that next. Welcome back to WCNC Plus. We are talking Carolina Panthers with Vashti Hurt from CarolinaBlitz.com. We're going to wrap it up and talk about this week's game at Jacksonville to open the season, Vashti. And, of course, everybody league-wide is really interested to see what Jacksonville does with two-way hopeful Heisman winner Travis Hunter. How much offense is he going to play? How much defense is he going to play? So, of course, we wanted to ask the players about that in the locker room, and you asked Pro Bowl cornerback J.C. Horn about how he's preparing to potentially be matched up with Travis Hunter.
How do you prepare for a guy like Travis Hunter?
Same way I prepare for every other receiver.
J.C. Full stop. What did you make of that?
Period. I mean, and I'm standing in front of him, and it was so straight-faced.
Yep.
Basically, you're giving all of this hype to a guy who hasn't yet earned it on this level. And, guys like, and quiet as kept, guys like JC like to humble a guy like Travis Hunter coming into the league. And so when he said it with straight face, I know in the back of his mind is like, this is a big boy league now.
Yeah.
And he's going to learn it against the Carolina Panthers. And that's what I got from that. We're not going to overhype this guy who hasn't shown us anything on the pro level.
Yeah, I mean, how concerned do you, everybody wants to talk about how Hunter could dominate the league on both sides, but how concerned do you think the Panthers actually are about what Travis Hunter can do in his first game, playing offense and playing defense? Because they're going to have to kind of install stuff for him as the season goes along down there.
JC didn't seem too concerned. And even Ashawn, we talked to him, and he didn't seem too concerned. These guys, and we have to learn it, and you mentioned it, Nick, when we were in the locker room. They're not just preparing for one guy. They're preparing for the whole offense or the whole defense. And from a true-telling standpoint, and I've talked to other professional players, it's really going to be hard for him to play both sides of the ball. That's the coaches up to them to navigate how they're going to use that. But they're not going to give Travis Hunter any more attention than they would give anybody else, especially not as a rookie.
Yeah, and, as much as the Panthers are the first team to try and figure out how to defend that or go at him when he's on defense, the Jaguars are the team trying to figure out how to do it and the most successful way. So this is week 1 for them. So I'll be honest, personally, he's going to be dangerous when he's on the field. But how much is he going to be on the field on both sides of the ball, and how much of an impact is he going to have? I'm not sure, how much of that is just a storyline and how much of that is in reality in week 1. You mentioned this to JC. I actually asked Derek Brown about this as we wrap up here, Vashti. There is an edge here. There was an edge in camp. Now, you saw it in JC's comments. What do you think is fueling that edge for these guys?
Losing and doubters and haters. And what better way to fuel yourself or fuel the team than to be fueled by wanting to win and fueled by people who don't believe in the group. And you got to channel that and make it work on Sundays. But there's a clear edge to this team, and I'm kind of excited about it because it's an undercurrent, but it's very strong if you look at it.
And just real quick, this week's game at Jacksonville, new coach, new system, quarterback with a lot to prove himself. How do you think the Panthers match up with Jaguars?
It's really going to be interesting because we don't know what their offense or their defense is going to look like, and there's still many questions about the Panthers. This is kind of the perfect game for both teams because it's young teams, prove themselves quarterbacks, no teams with either really high expectations. I think that if the Panthers do what they're supposed to do, they should come out on top on the road.
All right, Vashti Hurt, CarolinaBlitz.com at Keep Blitzing. What a way to kick off Mondays. I appreciate you joining me. And have fun with Chapel Bill tonight.
Oh, wow.
I can't wait to see how that goes.
This is going to be nuts, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thank you. Every Monday we'll be here on WCNC Plus talking Carolina Panthers. And don't forget, this Wednesday night at 9 o'clock on WCNC Plus, we've got our Countdown to Kickoff special, one-on-one interviews, heartfelt features, analysis, and much more here on WCNC Plus.